It's beautiful. The art. I feel at peace. I must have it.
Hey Megan, it's time to go to the store. What are you doing?
I'm training for my match. One opportunity for triumph. The people of New York, they need a leader. They need a champion. As soon as the bell tolls, for whom the bell tolls, I will be victorious.
That means Lulu needs a treat.
She gets a treat once she understands what the taste of success looks like. That is greater than any treat she could possibly have. Ah, my spawn. You are the cat, and Daredevil was the mouse. You must learn. In this world, you are not just simply a cat because you are a feline. It's because it is a state of mind. This is Daredevil. This is your enemy. I am also a cat.
So the store closes in like 20 minutes. Hey, who's that actress? I forgot.
Vanessa.
I would like to personally thank my mother who saw me put this bald cap in the Amazon cart and not ask me any questions as to why I was purchasing it. I feel like at this point she probably already knows the answer. Hi, welcome back to my channel. You're probably wondering why I am dressed like INFP icon Wilson Fisk. It is because we are going to be talking today about Daredevil Born Again Season 2. I don't really necessarily know how long I will be able to survive in this bald cap. It is a little toasty in here, not gonna lie to you. And I'm also wearing one of my work blazers, which I actually haven't worn or put on since I quit my last job. So I feel like it's kind of like inherently cursed just a little bit. I think this bald cap kind of fits that energy in that way. So, but yeah, today we're going to be talking about Daredevil Born Again Season 2. What the fuck happened to my necklace? Spoiler alert. If you have not seen through season 2 of Daredevil Born Again, and I also am going to give a very light spoilers if you are not fully caught up in the MCU. If you haven't seen all of Daredevil 1 through 3 from the Netflix series, then I would say spoiler alert for that as well. And without further ado, let's get started. I feel like my hair is resisting this wig, which is good because it seems like it's resisting baldness. This looks very shockingly similar to a swim cap. But can you imagine Michael Phelps or an elite level swimmer shows up to practice or shows up to a meet, and instead of wearing a swim cap, they show up with a bald head to dress like Wilson Fisk? That would be kind of awesome, actually. I feel like I would watch swimming a lot more if that were the case. This is squeezing my head. This is definitely not as comfortable as I thought it would be. If you are new to my channel, hi, hello, my name is Megan. By day I'm an attorney, and by night I make videos about film and television shows that I find to be interesting. And yes, sometimes I do dress in a bald cap and my suit from work to appear as Wilson Fisk while I do that. Just kind of looking ahead for some of the things that I'm going to be talking about in the next maybe 2 months or so. I'm going to be in my next video talking about the live action One Piece Season 2, as well as the new Avatar The Last Airbender, the live action series Season 2. I was going to cover One Piece in tandem with Daredevil Born Again, but I had way too many opinions about Daredevil to even broach the subject of an entirely different season of a television series, and I figured it would just make more sense to do it with Avatar because they're both kind of Netflix adaptations. I'm also going to be doing a video on The Bear, which I haven't really talked about that much on this channel. It also comes out, I believe, the same day as the Avatar series does, so I'll probably be releasing that maybe a couple weeks afterwards, and then somewhere around there in the same time frame, I would like to do a video talking about the things I've watched in 2026 so far. I think it would be appropriate maybe to do it like once every quarter, because I think doing it every month was just unrealistic, and you and I both knew that. Also, I'm going to be doing my season 5 in-depth analysis of Only Murders in the Building. I know that I'm very late on that. Also, I know you were probably wondering, but that is in fact a poster that my mother got me of Brazos hanging on my door. Coochie coochie coo. So there's a lot of things going on in this video already. Okay, I'm already getting very uncomfortable on this wig. Talking about the MCU, I want to give you guys, before we get into Daredevil Born Again Season 2, a little bit of my resume or qualifications to talk about the MCU in general, because it is a huge, massive, humongous franchise, and everyone has a fucking opinion about that. I think the perspective of where I'm coming from, I think, matters on how I view this project. Now, I would consider myself, for the most part, to be an MCU girly. I'm not like a day one person necessarily. I just think they're really fun movies. They do amazing casting. The fact that they have so many huge stars and the way that they bring these characters to life, I think it's an amazing feat. The way that all of the stories kind of intertwine with one another, similar to how the comic books do. I think that's just a really incredible feat. You can say what you want about the MCU effect, you can say what you want about them being generic Hollywood movies, whatever. I think they're fun, and that's what movies should be at the end of the day. I would say for the most part, at least through maybe phase 4, I've seen the majority of the project. I would say after phase 4, it started to become a little bit difficult to keep up with everything. It feels like you blink and there's another project that's been released. But I would say overall, while I do still consider myself very much a fan of the MCU, it's just been a little bit harder to be quite as on top of everything. As far as the comic books, I have never read any of them. It's just not my thing. The only comics that I ever read growing up were Garfield, Get Fuzzy, and Calvin and Hobbes. So very much if there is a cat protagonist, that was my jam. And there's nothing against superhero comics. I'm sure they're fantastic. I want to mention that because I feel like it doesn't necessarily matter if you've read the comic books or not to appreciate the MCU. Obviously, yes, the reference point of the comic books is the direct IP that we're using for the movies and television shows, of course. Obviously, that's where all these characters and these stories are from. But I think the MCU has made a conscious effort to kind of make its own thing. And that's really what you should be doing with movies and television shows if you're adapting them from a different source material and a different medium. And I want to just kind of clarify from my perspective that I don't necessarily believe that if something is different from one source material to the other, that it's necessarily a bad thing. And I don't think that, just because I haven't read it doesn't mean my opinion is invalid, right? I also just want to say too, and I feel like I always get really nervous talking about large IPs and really popular franchises, because by far, anytime I've ever talked about Marvel or Star Wars, those are the most downvoted videos in my entire channel. But I just want to reiterate that my opinion doesn't fucking mean anything, right? I'm sitting here with a bald cap in my room, just talking about a show that I like. I'm not trying to spread negativity. I'm not trying to shit on you if you really liked the show. I'm not trying to just say that my word is the gospel. If you have input or insight that disagrees with me, feel free to share it in the comments. But let's try to keep it light. Let's try to keep it positive. Let's try to keep it just you have your opinion, I have mine, and that's totally chill. If we can't handle that, then maybe we should be watching a different video. I don't know, guys. Do you think it's noticeable that I was wearing a bald cap?
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because
Hopefully it'll go away in a couple hours. I want to talk a little bit about the Netflix Daredevil series before we get into Born Again. I think it's important to kind of understand how we got here before we get into Daredevil Born Again Season 2. Daredevil, the Netflix series, is one of my favorite MCU projects ever. I know that it's not technically an MCU project. It's kind of MCU adjacent, but it is technically part of the same canon. I still think it's probably one of the best MCU superhero projects. And if you want to know what my other 4 were, Spider-Man 2, which I also know is not technically part of the MCU, but it was multiversified. It counts. I'm counting it. It's an amazing movie. Captain America the Winter Soldier, Infinity War, Hawkeye, so severely underrated, it's crazy, and Daredevil, the Netflix series. Those are my 5. Fight me in the comment section, but don't actually, like I said, please be nice to me. Daredevil is a fantastic series for many, many reasons. I think one of the things that really made it stand out to me personally is that it's weirdly grounded in reality. It's not like Thor, where he has a hammer that he swings around and is able to fly around from one planet to the next. Yeah, maybe somebody can't like hear conversations several blocks away, but the fact that it's something so simple as like your senses are heightened, and that's how he's able to like be a vigilante. Like, I think that's kind of fun, and I think it also allows the action sequences and the other ways that Matt is able to kind of navigate and figure things out without seeing something be a little bit more creative, and I think that's super cool. I also do think the chemistry between the cast and Daredevil is just absolutely exceptional. You could not have picked a more perfect person to play Matt Murdock than Charlie Cox. His depiction of being visually blind, I think, has won awards from different blind organizations because of just how accurate it was. The chemistry between like him and Fisk, him and Karen, him and Foggy especially.
How many fingers am I holding up?
All of the performances feel really, really good. I also love the moral dilemma that is the Daredevil character. He is basically guided by the moral trifecta that is legal justice, vigilante justice, and Catholic guilt. He wants to be bringing people to justice through his job by day, but he also knows that there is corruption going on. So that's why he becomes Daredevil and he's a vigilante. But then there's also the Catholic guilt element. Because of his Catholic morality, he can't take it to the point where he is going to actually kill somebody or take their lives because it's against his religious values. That trifecta is a really fascinating moral dilemma that he's constantly facing, and it becomes a subject of like dispute. It does become a dispute in Daredevil Born Again season 2, but I think especially in the original Daredevil series, the way that they were able to kind of unpack that and depict that, because there are a lot of situations where there's like really evil people and Matt has a hard time taking it so far, and then the question becomes like, how far do you take it, or what do you need to do as a person that's like so bad that it would justify death, if ever. It's a really fascinating dilemma, and I haven't really seen any other superheroes kind of unpack it in that way, the religious component in particular. I also am not a huge violence person. It's something that definitely I have to look away when it happens. Daredevil is definitely much more of a violent series, and it's a little bit of a departure from the MCU vibe. I don't necessarily mind it in this show in particular because I think it's actually used to further tell and explore some of the themes going on with Matt, particularly with like the vigilante justice and the Catholic, morality and everything like that. And I think it's used in a really very compelling way. I still look away, but it makes me appreciate more that I feel like the writers are going in a direction that feels intentional. I also just love the action sequences. There's like uncut scenes, very iconic scenes in the original Daredevil series, and you can tell that it's Charlie Cox doing a lot of the stunts and everything, and they feel realistic. I mean, the show is like technically a legal drama, and I've talked many times in my prior videos that I don't really like legal dramas and I don't like gore. So the fact that they were able to incorporate both of those things into this television show, and I still fucking love it, is kind of an amazing accomplishment and should speak to how good Daredevil, the Netflix series, truly was. Well, the good news is the line is going away on my head, but I also had to lose the blazer because it was getting very hot in here. So now I'm just wearing like normal clothes. However, I did buy the bald cap for like $10, and I did put on a blazer so that I could entertain you guys. I mean, how many other YouTubers are doing that solely for your entertainment? I have a line on my head because of that. It's also raining very aggressively outside, so we are once again dealing with the elements. I had to turn on the lights because it was storming and it was getting kind of dark in here, but now it's sunny. It's not as effective as it was before. The vibes are definitely better a little bit. Daredevil Born Again season 1. We should talk about that because it was really bad. I have made a list of all of the things that I thought were really bad about Daredevil Born Again season 1 so that we can kind of evaluate in going through season 2 whether the problems from the first season have been improved or rectified in some way. One of my first problems with Daredevil Born Again season 1 is of course the fact that they killed off Foggy within the first 5 minutes of the first episode. The whole purpose of Foggy's death was to basically motivate Matt to not be Daredevil anymore because his response to Foggy's murder was basically throwing Bullseye off of a building and like almost killing him. It just seems like a crazy choice though to do when Foggy is such an important character, not only just to the show itself and to the fans. Like, people love Foggy, myself included. I would literally die for him. But he's also super important to Matt. But killing him in the manner that they did so quickly, like, yes, you have the benefit of like moving this character development along a little bit for Matt and the story in season 1, 1, but it wasn't even written very well, so it wasn't truly that effective. And you're also killing off one of the most important characters in the entire series. Not having a person that could even replace Foggy with like sufficient effectiveness of like someone that Daredevil can talk to and a friend. You're just removing a very essential component to this story, and I feel like they just kind of did it for shock value. I do think that it was kind of like a thoughtless decision because they didn't really have a backup plan of like, okay, well, how are we going to supplement Foggy if he's not going to be the one to serve that function? And I think it's a function that is definitely necessary in this story. The action was also really bad in season 1. It is a show that is a big cornerstone of it is the good action sequences. A lot of uncut scenes with Charlie Cox doing all the action. Everything is very intricately choreographed to use Matt Murdock's powers and his senses and everything in order to win in a fight. It was very run-of-the-mill CGI action sequences that are cut and spliced together. A lot of the violence very much felt like it was just for the sake of and just for shock value rather than actually kind of serving any storytelling purpose. There was a couple moments that were exceptions. For example, Daredevil throwing Bullseye off the roof in response to Foggy's death. Everything else, like the fight sequences, there was so much CGI blood just like squirting out of everybody's head. You could go like this to somebody and they would have like a liter of blood just like exploding out of their head. It's not that we like violence, it's the purpose that it serves in the story and for the characters. I also just didn't give a fuck about the new people. The characters weren't interesting, they were very forgettable, and again, especially when you're killing someone off like Foggy, who plays such a critical role in the story for Matt and for everything else, when you're not replacing that presence with a new character, it's really not going to work. It fundamentally can't work. All these characters that are supposed to have a history with Matt didn't feel that either through the way the writing was or the character chemistry with these actors. Matt was also not Daredevil most of the season. I understand why he didn't want to be Daredevil in season 1. That doesn't necessarily though make a really interesting story when the whole show is called Daredevil and he like refuses to be Daredevil most of the time. And you combine that with him not having interesting characters to play opposite to when he's being Matt. What the fuck am I watching then if he doesn't want to be Daredevil? Like what are we doing here actually? Interesting storylines in season 1, there were a couple of them, but they stopped too soon. I know the person who played the White Tiger, Hector, I mean, that was a really great storyline and I thought he and Matt had great chemistry together, but it ended very, very abruptly. And I think that might have been because the person who played him had cancer and was very, very sick when he was filming the episode, and it was really great that they dedicated that episode to him. He did a phenomenal job. I understand that that's probably what played into that, so that's fine. Also with Muse, who's supposed to be like poised as the main villain in season 1, and then he got killed like randomly an episode later. And I think Heather or Helen or whatever the fuck her name is was the one that did it. This was a great opportunity. Why did we stop it when we did? Pacing was really bad in season 1. I think it was kind of compounded with the fact that there was really not a whole lot going on. Also, finally, and we'll get into this talking about season 2, Fisk being the mayor was really, really stupid. I know that that's a story that happens in the comic books, and I know that it's like you can be a fucking criminal as a politician and just do whatever the fuck you want, and that's fine apparently now. I still just will say that I think it was kind of like a little bit, for me, it felt like jumping the shark a bit. Okay, well, now that we've finally got through all of the things that I wanted to talk about, now we can actually talk about my thoughts and opinions on Daredevil Born Again Season 2. Also, this is my cat, by the way. Hello. Now, the ultimate question that we're trying to answer here is, did it improve from season 1? And also, I guess, kind of as like an ancillary question, did it compare in any way to the Netflix series in any capacity? As to the latter question, I'm not entirely sure. We might have to wait till the end of the video so that I can unpack that fully. But generally speaking, did it improve from season 1 Born Again? Absolutely 100%. This second season is a substantial improvement from Daredevil Born Again season 1, but it still has a lot of problems, and I'm going to be talking about them in this video. But I will also give this show its flowers that it did improve in ways that I feel were critical to my enjoyment and other people's enjoyment. And it did also feel like the writers of the show were listening to the feedback. Either that or this was their plan all along and it just happened to coincide with the things that people were complaining about. I don't know. I didn't necessarily expect to watch or enjoy season 2 for any other reason than to make a video about it. But I did find myself feeling compelled by some of the storylines. I do feel like there was a lot of improvements to make the other characters in the show more enjoyable and entertaining and memorable in ways that they really weren't in the first season, which that in and of itself is a huge accomplishment as well. I do think that there are certain problems and things that were set up in the first season of Daredevil Born Again that the show is still trying to get themselves out from under, and I don't know if they ever will. I also think that there are certain problems that occurred in season 1 that they're trying to overcorrect with in the second season, but maybe going kind of in the opposite direction a little bit too intensely. Some things with pacing, some things with story progression, things like that. Maybe we need to find a little little bit of a counterbalance between the two. But again, I appreciate the efforts that are being put into listening to the feedback and implementing them in the second season. The finale was a lot of people's favorites. It was not mine. I feel like there are a lot of aspects of the finale that were actually kind of maddening to me, and we'll talk about that as we go through this video. And it left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth, I'm not gonna lie, because towards the end of the season, I was like, this is actually really good. I'm really enjoying this. And then the finale, there were certain things that happened. I was like, what the fuck are we doing here? But on the whole, the second season, definitely better than the first. Talking about the writing just generally in No, we're not talking about that show anymore. No. Talking about the writing generally in Daredevil Born Again Season 2. Most aspects of Season 2 of... I almost did it again. Oh my god, what the fuck is wrong with my brain? Like most things in Daredevil Born Again Season 2, I feel like the second season is just a massive improvement from Season 1, and the writing is no exception to that. Just given the fact that the first season is basically a cobbled together mess. Season 2, there were some aspects of the writing that I didn't necessarily love, but on the whole, it very much felt like somebody's intended vision, and there's more of an intentionality to it than Season 1, and that in and of itself is an accomplishment. I do feel like there is a lot of raised stakes. You need to have that tension. You need to have something that's making you feel like you understand why people are doing what they're doing because of the danger of acting or not acting. Everything going on with Fisk, whatever you think of how the circumstances came to be, the fact that his ICE officers, let's just fucking call it what it is, his little military that's running around arresting people, killing people, you know, being extremely corrupt and all of that, changing the legal system, those kinds of things we got to see in so many instances of the danger of what happens if Daredevil doesn't do something. I will say, just generally, the story felt crowded a lot of times. There was a lot of things going on. There was a lot of jumping from one thing to the next. And I think the writing, as a result, in order to kind of accommodate everything that was happening, the writing at times maybe was a little bit clunky, was a little bit awkward. It was kind of just, you know, glossing over things to get to the next step. I'm not expecting like perfection here. It is a great improvement, and I cannot stress that enough. But there were aspects of the writing that I feel like definitely could have been better, and maybe if they just pared a little bit of the stuff down, and I think the show would have been better for it. That, or I think maybe it could have benefited from one more episode just to not have everything feel quite as congested. Talking about the dialogue specifically in Season 2 of Born Again. Like I said, the plot for Season 2, it's a lot going on. The dialogue felt a little bit like an afterthought at times. We have to relay this information because of the urgency of what's going on, so we're just kind of like saying information so that the audience understands, that the character understands, but it doesn't actually feel like it's clever or crafty or, you know, interesting to listen to. It's just kind of like out of necessity rather than out of like intentionality, if that makes sense. There were a couple exceptions that I thought were really good. For example, there was a scene in Season 2, Episode 1, where Mr. Charles was sitting down with Vanessa and Fisk, and he's basically talking about how they're going to get the weapons off of the boat that was sank earlier in that episode. He's basically essentially telling them, like, I can get a crew of expendable people and have them do the dirty work for us, and then we can sink them all on the ship and basically murder them, and no one will ask any questions because no one will miss them. And we also still don't really know much about Mr. Charles at this point. The way that it was written and the way that he performed it was really good. It's making the audience be like, oh my god, wait, is he saying what I think he's saying? And like making you want to know like what the fuck this guy's deal is. I feel like that was just a very well written scene. There was a little bit more finesse with how it was written. There was also the scene in, I think it was like, I don't remember, Episode 5 or 6, where Karen is literally holding a gun to Bullseye's head and is ready to murder him, and she and Matt get into an argument talking about, you know, like the consequences of that and the whole morality discussion and argument and everything. And it just felt like a really authentic, as crazy as that scene was, scene. And it just felt like it was very well written. It was a much needed kind of coming to heads of tension between these two characters. But other than that, it felt like the frequency with which we needed to move on from one plot point and jump to the next, you felt that kind of like rushing through things with the dialogue, but not in a good way. In terms of the pacing, Season 2, I think, wanted to beat the allegations that it was boring by just adding a lot more action and a lot more, you know, things to do in this season, which is a good thing in that there's things happening. But it did also feel like we were moving at a little bit of a breakneck speed, where I wish that we had more time to kind of stop and process some of the crazy events that were occurring. It did feel like it was extreme in the opposite direction. I did say this in my Stranger Things video, and I'm actually intending to say Stranger Things in this situation, but in my Stranger Things video, I talked a lot about how there's like insane stakes of basically the end of the world going on in that story, and yet there was always so much time and energy for people to sit down and have 75 conversations in response to whatever was going on, and it felt like there wasn't enough action or enough things to do, so everyone's just having a fuck-ass conversation. I kind of feel like the opposite in this situation, where I kind of wish characters did have more fuck-ass conversations, because it felt like things were happening so rapidly that we didn't really even have time to have scenes where characters were processing or reacting to these crazy sequences of events. For example, Daredevil literally revealed his identity as being Matt Murdock in the 8th episode, and there were several characters in the courtroom that had this revealed to, but we didn't even get to see like a reaction of them actually processing that, or just seeing what the consequences or the fallout of that was. Kirsten literally was like covering for Matt's ass at their law firm, maybe thought he might have been like dead for a little while, then find out he's Daredevil.
I am Daredevil.
And then we just cut to a scene where they're all sitting in like the judge's chambers or whatever, and they're just talking about it like it's just like, we're just fucking over that, we're moving on. Heather was in the courtroom as well, and that's her ex-boyfriend, and she finds this out, and maybe she, like, a part of her subconsciously knew that he was Daredevil already, but we didn't even get to see, like, that would have been nice to have a conversation between the two to just see, like, how she felt about it, how he felt about it, whatever, but it was just like, nope, we don't even have time for that, we have to fucking move on. Those reactions and processing from the characters, those are critical scenes, especially when crazy shit is happening in the story. To be able to actually, like, take a breath, and also as an audience process and react to those things as well. I feel like those are really fulfilling moments in the story that we didn't really have time for, given the breakneck pace that we were dealing with the entire season, as well as all of the many characters and the many subplots that we had to kind of reconcile as well. There was also the whole thing with like Cherry early in the season. He had a fucking heart attack. Some of the agents were trying to kill him in the hospital, and then they had to move him, but then we didn't even get any resolution about that. Like, where did Cherry go? And then he shows up at the end of the season and he's like fine. And maybe the writers knew that Cherry was kind of a dud of a character. It just felt like it was a consistent problem where all of these characters didn't really get any opportunity to catch their breath or process any of the crazy shit that was going on. Because of necessity for the plot, we just had to kind of push forward. The vibes are really starting to come together in here, which is also indicative of how fucking long it's taking me to film this video. We are literally watching the hours pass before our very eyes as I am struggling to get through each of these sections. Speaking about tone in Daredevil Born Again Season 2, again, it was an improvement from prior seasons, but definitely not as good as I think it could be. Daredevil and violence kind of goes hand in hand, both in the original Netflix series and from, based on my understanding, also in the comic books as well. Like I expressed with Season 1, it felt like it was almost like an aesthetic choice to just have a lot of gratuitous violence for seemingly no reason, rather than actually folding them into the scenes and the emotional, events that are happening in the first season. I do think in Season 2, there was more of a balance and an intentional use of violence. There was just a lot more action in general, so having a lot of the gratuitous violence makes a lot of sense. Also, just the brutality that we see the Fisk administration employ to maintain power. I think the use of violence in that as well really did a lot to kind of show, again, the stakes of what we're dealing with in the situation. In terms of just the general tone of Season 2, I think that it was much more consistent than it was in Season 1. However, I do think that, if you're looking at like, the original Netflix series as an example or a reference point, there was still a little bit of balance and a little bit of like counteracting that dark violence and tension tone that you have in that show with people like Foggy or people like, Matt being charming. While there was a consistent dark theme and tone in this season, I do wish there was just maybe a little bit of levity. I just wish there was a little bit more moments to kind of break up the tension and the darkness that we had in this season, just to make it feel a little bit more impactful, I guess, or just a little bit more balanced. Overall, I feel like the tone was much more appropriate given the circumstances, and I think that it was a much bigger improvement from the first season. Hello, it's a new day. I forgot what I was going to say. So I guess we're just going to move on. But before we move on, there is one point, because I was editing the footage that I had already filmed thus far, and I wanted to bring up one quick point before we jump into the character discussion, because apparently I haven't said enough already about the previous sections in this video. Just another point on pacing, another quick example here. I felt like there was an example in Season 2, Episode 3 of really fantastic pacing and taking your time with a story beat and just really fleshing it out in a way that felt satisfying. And then there was another example in another episode that just fucking wasn't. I wanted to highlight them really quickly just as a good juxtaposition of how this show was a little bit hit or miss with some of its pacing and progression of story elements. So in season 2, episode 3, Daredevil is going to go into the dungeon where they're keeping all the vigilantes and people that have spoken out against the Fisk administration and let everybody go. In order to do that, he goes and talks to Kirsten, who is like trashed.
I'm a little bit drunk.
And he's asking her, because she went and talked to Jack Duquesne's earlier that day, he asked her to really pay attention and think back on all of the things that she like sensed, everything else she noticed when they were taking her into the dungeon. I felt like that was a really amazing way to like show this is how Daredevil is figuring out where the vigilantes are being held. It could have been easy for the story to just say like, oh, he just knew because of intel or whatever. I liked the fact that they actually took the time to show us how they figured that out, how Kirsten managed to relay that information to him. Contrasting that to season 2, episode 5, Daredevil rescued Bullseye and he's like fucking bleeding out because Vanessa shot him. In the church, the Fisk agents are surrounding the building, they're infiltrating the building, and Daredevil literally says to Bullseye, I don't think both of us can escape. I need to leave you. I'm sorry. Bye. Because of the whole flashback with Foggy and trying to give people a second chance, blah, 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 he decides to save Bullseye as well. And we don't actually see that moment happen. We just see the end result of them panting outside of the heavily surrounded church that they were previously in. We don't actually get to see the miraculous, impossible rescue mission that we were told literally like 90 seconds earlier was absolutely like a suicide mission if both of them were to attempt to escape, especially considering that Bullseye is quite literally dying. That could have been a really interesting moment to see, again, just how Daredevil is able to get out of these situations using his senses, using his abilities. I feel like we were kind of deprived of that, and given the fact that that, for me personally, is one of the most interesting aspects of Daredevil as a hero, like seeing how he's going to use his abilities to make a situation work. The fact that we kind of just glossed over it, especially when we're being told that it was literally impossible to get out of alive, it just felt a little bit like, okay, we just need to get past this, and the writers aren't creative enough to figure out how to get past it, so we're just going to get past it, and we're going to have them breathing heavily to indicate that it was a lot of exertional effort. So the characters of Daredevil Born Again Season 2. I thought the characters in Season 1, how they were written, either the returning cast, but especially the new characters introduced, were the biggest problem of the first season. It didn't have really impact on anything. It was boring. They were flat, one-dimensional. I don't even remember if Buck was in Season 1. I still don't actually 100% know for sure. I'm happy to report for Season 2 that while yes, there were still a lot of problems with characters, and we're going to talk about that in depth in just a minute here, on the whole, I think that there was a substantial improvement with how Daredevil Born Again Season 2 handled its characters, and I'm very happy and proud. Proud is a bit of a strange, that's a little bit of an extreme. I'm very happy to hear it. Good for them. It seemed like there was a sincere effort to actually make, especially the characters that were introduced in Season 1, actually have some stakes and some impact on the story that was memorable and important, and I appreciate that. There were overall just a lot of characters.
There's too many of them.
It's just a lot of different character arcs that we have to deal with and a lot of different moving parts going on, and that sometimes felt a little bit claustrophobic. And I think that's definitely like a problem with editing and kind of paring down and figuring out what you need to focus on and not. But yeah, overall, the characters were pretty good, but definitely not perfect, and we're going to get into all of that right now. I feel like this thing is just like so close to my face. I'm just trying really hard to not like bam into it and blast everybody's eardrums. So, like I said, one of the biggest problems of Season 1 of Born Again was the characters that were introduced in that season. This season, they kind of fixed that problem for the most part. I would say the biggest standouts for me in Season 2 were Daniel and Buck. Everything that kind of happened with them and then their little friendship that was developed throughout this season. I thought it worked really well. It does feel like a very New York male thing to create a friendship and bond over sharing a street hot dog together.
Not bad.
It was nice to see the kind of natural progression of their friendship, and then of course the unfortunate ending with Daniel's arc in particular. That whole scene was really played out very well. I think Daniel and BB's relationship and that whole storyline was a bit of a hit or miss for me. Their relationship was weird because it was like I could not tell for the life of me if she was just really playing him and doing it very convincingly, or if she was like actually had feelings for him, or maybe a combination of both. It also just felt a little bit like fundamentally dumb to me that BB is the niece of somebody who was brutally murdered by Fisk and who is a journalist that constantly criticized Fisk back when he was alive in the original Daredevil series. And then BB was doing the same thing before Fisk became a mayor. How the hell would you actually ever, under any circumstances, trust this person? Especially because it seemed like Daniel knew the allegations that Fisk might have killed Ben Urich. So why, under any circumstances, would you trust BB, especially when she is like the worst liar on the face of the fucking planet? I did think that it was really nice that Daniel had a change of heart and like sacrificed himself for her and did the right thing and said make it count. I was sad to see that he passed away, but it was a nice little ending to his arc, and I feel like it did actually surprise me because I felt like he was going to have more of like a godfather fall from grace, like kind of turning into a mini Fisk himself. So that was great. Whatever. BB, whatever. Helen, aka Heather. I literally am looking at my slideshow right now and it says Helen, and I have been referring to her as Helen, so in my brain, for some reason, she's Helen. I don't think anyone likes this character, like, as a person or thinks that she's doing good things. She definitely annoyed me in season 1 as Matt's girlfriend, but also just looking at it from the perspective of, like, if you live in a society that is kind of anti-vigilante and you just got brutally attacked by a serial killer, like, maybe you're not thinking as clearly as you might be if that didn't happen to you. Season 2, she definitely did not get any more likable, but I don't think that was necessarily the intention, and I think the trajectory for her character, while infuriating and unethical and frustrating at a fundamental level, was kind of an interesting perspective. I mean, it seems like everybody in the city is feeding into the lies and the narrative that Fisk is portraying, so we can't necessarily fault Heather for also thinking that he's trying to save them. The only thing that just kind of fucking killed me a little bit, Heather would refer to what happened to her as like a vigilante attacking her, like Muse was a vigilante, even though she knows that he wasn't and that he was a serial killer and that Daredevil was coming in to attack him. And yes, I know too that she's kind of going through a mental break right now. It would be more believable to me if like Daredevil, when he went in to try to help her in season 1 and then maybe she accidentally got injured by whatever he was doing to try to stop Muse, maybe that would make it a little bit more believable in my brain. But it was like very objectively Daredevil came in to help, and the fact that she's now like putting them both together as the same. The actress did a really great job, but that scene with her and Karen in the dungeon when they were both like kind of trying to torment and taunt each other, that was just like such a great acting performance for both of them. Kirsten, season 1, I feel like they were definitely trying to make her the replacement for Foggy, which they just didn't have enough acting chemistry or history established to actually make that work. In season 2, I think she was just a reminder to the audience that there are in fact people that still believe in the legal system, and also just to show us how messed up the legal system is under Fisk's reign. Girlie is just trying to do her fucking best in a very corrupt system, and as a fellow avocado at law, keep fighting the good fight, girl. You're doing great. Every time I look at Cherry, he just looks like Tito Francona. That's the only thing I could think of when I saw that man. I really don't know much else about the character. The new White Tiger, sure. I'm 1,000% positive that that's going to be a spin-off in some capacity. It does feel like a lot of this, like with these shows, it's hard for me to fully like give my opinion because I know that Marvel projects inherently have to like spin things off and get things ready to explore in another project. And I know that's what they're doing with her. So it's like hard for me to give a feedback about it in isolation when I know that that's also the function of what these shows are trying to do. As far as the characters that were introduced in other projects in the MCU but that weren't in season 1 of Born Again, aka Jack Duquesne and Jessica Jones, it's similar to the White Tiger situation. Their involvement in this show in particular, if you just look at it in a vacuum, felt a little bit like, yeah, they played a role, but then they just kind of ducked in and out, and that was it. Kristen Ritter did an amazing job with the role. It's great to see that Jessica Jones has found some peace. I've only really seen season 1 of Jessica Jones, and she was in the fucking trenches from what I've seen so far. It just felt like they were kind of flirting with some ideas with storylines from her, but they were very obviously setting things up to be explored in future projects. I know Marvel is trying to do that with the intention of getting me to tune into those future projects, but if I'm just looking at this for what it is right now, I don't really know what to do with her involvement. I also felt the same way with Jack Duquesne's. He was just kind of in and out for 1 or 2 episodes. I fucking love Jack. I liked seeing him like beat the shit out of people with pipes and all of that. That was fun, but then he kind of like ducked out as well. He's like, here's my bank account information, bye. It would have been cool even if he just came back in in the final episode and just kind of had all these people kind of coming together and just connecting the dots a little bit more in that way. I was actually surprised that he didn't. Now talking about the new people that were not in any Marvel projects prior to this season. Primarily, we're talking about Mr. Charles, aka Matthew Lillard. He came in kind of like hot and fast early in the season, and I was very excited, like I said, after that first scene in the first episode, just to kind of see what he was going to bring to the table. His character functions primarily to like give an excuse for how Fisk is able to circumvent just the legal justice system and allow him to establish martial law as a mayor. It did seem as the season went on, though, that he kind of lost any bite to the character that I thought he was going to have. It felt very much like he was just kind of like getting bullied by Fisk in a way that diminished any influence or fear that he was supposed to have. It just felt like the character kind of lost steam halfway through, and I wish there was better resolution to his involvement in what was going on. It definitely seems like they're setting up for something with him and Bullseye, and I think those two actors would be great on screen together. Looking at this season for what it is, I feel like he was a bit of a missed opportunity, and I would have liked to have seen more. Now talking about our returning characters from either Daredevil or from Daredevil Born Again Season 1. I want to start off by talking about Bullseye, because I have complicated feelings about this. Here's the thing. I would die for Foggy Nelson, and I know that Bullseye did, in fact, kill Foggy Nelson. However, I'm kind of obsessed with Bullseye as a character. I think he was like the star of this season. This actor was born to play this character. He is so unpredictable in his energy, the way that he was written. I think his power, just being able to have the ability to use anything as a projectile and as a weapon, it's not realistic, but it's almost realistic, so it's grounded in enough of a reality that is established by this story that it makes him utilizing his powers much more creative and fun and engaging, especially with a lot of the action sequences. His unpredictability with just like what he's going to do and what his moral compass and where it's pointing was also just really thrilling to watch. He's not a good person by any means, but he is ridiculously flawed in a very compelling and interesting way that contrasts Daredevil. Their scenes together, having that history and that dynamic was really compelling to watch because they worked really well together on screen. This whole season, every single time Bullseye was involved, I felt the fear, I felt the dread, I felt the intensity, and I was like actually locked the fuck in every time anything had to do with him. Now we have to talk about Karen. I know that in the prior show, the Netflix series, Karen was a bit of a controversial person. I know a lot of people didn't necessarily like her or agree with a lot of her decisions. I think Karen is a very frustrating human, but I think she's a fantastic character and performed very, very well. I think that she really benefited this season by coming back in a full-time capacity. However, I do have a couple questions. Number one, since when the fuck are she and Matt now just like fully in a relationship? I understand that they're both in hiding and they're both in a bunker, and sometimes shared trauma, very much like Jonathan and Nancy from Stranger Things, sometimes being in just an unbelievably niche, traumatic, life or death situation might bring people together, especially when you have like a physical attraction. I understand that she and Matt used to date in the past, and so maybe people could just chalk it up to like, okay, well, they're in a bunker, what the fuck else are they supposed to do all the time? It would have been nice to just have a little bit of a reprieve of just kind of seeing how that relationship came to be, because at the end of last season, Matt and Karen were not necessarily on good terms. The jump between that and them saying I love you to each other, it would have been nice to see that relationship progression, even just in a flashback or something, but you know, chalking it up to just everything happened off camera, I think it would have been a good opportunity to just give a little bit of a counterpoint to everything else that was going on this season. I think overall, Karen is the type of character that Matt needs to kind of talk to and have that rapport with. They have a mutual understanding and a history that is just evident with every scene that they share. I do also love the scene where Karen is literally about to murder Bullseye and Matt comes in and they're like screaming at each other, and it's really a conversation that only Karen could have had and challenged Matt on, because she's probably the only other person other than Matt that loved and appreciated and understood Foggy as much as Matt did. It's a very complicated situation, and I think having her have that conversation with Matt was absolutely essential, and I think it was a very good scene as well. Vanessa, you know, Vanessa in the Born Again series is kind of like, I don't know. I just remember last season she had like an affair because Fisk wasn't paying attention to her. He had her like lover locked in a dungeon in the basement, and then I think he like murdered him with an axe, and then they ate dinner next to his dead body. Like I don't know. She's just basically been preparing to murder Bullseye this season, and that's all she's really been doing. I don't really understand her relationship with the governor. I don't know why the governor would be like, well, I don't trust your husband who's actually the mayor, but I do trust you with him, even though she doesn't like what he's been doing thus far. It just feels like they didn't really know what to do with Vanessa. However, her death scene and the fact that they did actually decide to kill her shocked my ass. I had no fucking idea. Marvel did spoil it for me on their Instagram page. Seeing it, even knowing what was going to happen, just seeing the fact that they decided to do that, it was beautiful, wonderfully acted by both of them. The dynamic shift after her death is definitely something that was kind of needed to just kind of like unhinge him in a way to make everything come to a head at the end of the season. Fisk. Okay, where's my bald cap? I think I'm not going to put it on my head again. Maybe I'll just put it like this so that like the effort. Here's the thing, and I want you guys to hold my hand when I say this, okay? I love Wilson Fisk. I think he's an amazing character. He is fucking terrifying. Wouldn't want to be friends with him, but he's a very good character. However, I think we need to like not have Fisk involved in Daredevil anymore, or at least limit his involvement to like maybe a reoccurring role. We've gone through this whole fucking thing with Fisk so many times, and he is limit tested to the point of getting elected as mayor, instilling martial law, having a secret police go around, arrest and murder people, and then at the end of this season, literally like picking up civilians and cracking their spines against a pillar in the public like courthouse on camera for everyone to see. He still gets away with it. And I know that's kind of the catch-22 with supervillains anyways, where it's like you have to have this person keep coming back and keep coming back. They're doing so many things, like how do you not just send them to jail forever, or just like launch them into outer space or something? Like you need to keep having them come back. But I think just Fisk has crossed the line where he has officially done too much, where having him come back in any capacity would just be a kind of farce at this point. Even the fact at the end of this season, Daredevil was like, okay, I'm going to let you leave New York. If that were to happen, and then he came back again and was causing trouble again, I don't think we could necessarily take this show seriously anymore. And that's me saying that with my head looking like this. There's also other villains I think that we could definitely explore. You know what I absolutely love that's just like super amazing and great is when I'm trying to film, I have to stop because there are motorcyclists going up and down my street, and I'm like, okay, I'll just wait for a couple seconds for them to be done. And then for like 2 minutes straight, they're just to the point where I feel like my brain is exploding. Okay, let's just keep moving forward. I want to talk about Daredevil a little bit because he is our main character, and I have a lot of thoughts and opinions about him. I would like to quote my friend Rita when we were talking about this show. You see? Do you fucking see? We were sitting around talking about this show a couple weeks ago, and she had a very wonderful insight that I wanted to share with you all pertaining to Matt Murdock in Born Again Season 2. She said something to the effect of, I don't even find Matt hot anymore because he's so fucking annoying. And you know what? I can't help but agree with that. This season, I feel like he was just a little bit annoying, and I don't think that he was utilized as well as he should be. And I want to unpack that a little bit. This is not to take away at all from anything that Charlie Cox did this season. I thought his stunts were really good. I thought his performance, as always, really, really good as Matt Murdock. However, some of the writing choices just perplexed me a little bit. Matt is in hiding this season, and a lot of his actions, both as Daredevil and as Matt Murdock, inherently have to be extremely reactionary to just events that are happening in New York City. I understand that's just like the choice that we're dealing with, and that's just the state of affairs with the plot. I think just that fundamental choice of pigeonholing Matt so severely that we have to have him being very reactionary to things, it just felt like he didn't have a lot of agency this season. And yes, I know that was by design. It doesn't allow for a lot of character growth or flexibility for him to do much else. Also, given the extreme events and everything going on, Matt has to respond to this and then respond to this and respond to this. It didn't leave a lot of room for him to be an actual character. There's a lot of charm to Matt Murdock, especially in the Netflix series. There's a lot to him other than just being a vigilante. And granted, the times in this season are very extreme. There's martial law by the mayor because that's a thing in this universe, whatever. There's still room for him to be a normal person, or there could have been. Again, that kind of ties back to that like balance that I think this show still needs to figure out that the original show did have. Not saying you have to do absolutely everything the same as the original Netflix series, but I think the abstract idea of just having a little bit of balance to make the more intense moments stand out and work better. I think having Matt be a little bit more like himself would have gone a long way. Or if, you know, maybe these bad circumstances have changed him fundamentally or whatever, maybe explore that and like kind of get into why he's different and really unpack that a little bit. But they didn't really do that either through like a romantic storyline with Karen, even in a very superficial way, or something to just show a little glimmer of his personality, I think that would have just kind of broken through a lot of the exhausting just sameness of this season that I was desperately looking for. Even in like the flashback where we see him with Foggy, it did kind of feel like a painful reminder not only that like Foggy is no longer alive, but also that Matt is witty and he's charming and he has, you know, opinions on things. He's a character, a human, you might say. This season he didn't really have any of that, and part of it is because you don't have a person like Foggy to help bring that out in him. I also just want to bring up, and I know that this is inconsistent with what I said earlier, that I think that Matt's a fascinating character with his like morality trifecta. But this season, it just started to feel like his values and his perspective on killing versus not killing was getting to be a little bit absurd. Now, I am not saying that we should kill people. I'm not a vigilante for a reason. I have no earthly idea what I would ever do in any of these situations, okay? I'd probably like hide in a corner because I have anxiety. The stakes of this season have gotten to such an extreme extent that it starts to feel a little bit ridiculous. Fisk is literally murdering people with his bare hands in front of all of these people, basically in front of the entire city. It starts to become, at least for me personally, a little bit sillier for a vigilante to say, oh, no, I gotta let him go retire on a sandals resort beach somewhere. I don't want to kill anybody. I want to be responsible for anyone's death. But then, like, by not doing anything, hundreds of people have died, at least, as a result of this. It's a position, it's a philosophical argument, whatever you want to call it, but I think it just starts to really weaken Matt's position way more, the more intense the stakes get with everything that happened in season 2. Okay guys, we're getting close to the end. And by close, I mean not that close, but we're getting there. I want to talk about something I like to call the film mechanics of season 2 of Born Again. Now, film mechanics are things that I like to call the nuts and bolts that go into making the idea of a story a finished product. Now, in regards to the stunts that went into season 2 of Born Again, they were an improvement, but they were still like not necessarily, I think, up to everybody's standard. Season 1 felt like all of the stunts were very Marvelized. A lot of the stunts, especially lately in the different phases, at least the ones that I've seen, are very like broken up and chopped up into very quick cuts of somebody who's clearly a stunt person. It's not like an unbroken shot like in Daredevil, the Netflix series, where you can very clearly see it's the same person doing these stunts and they're very hyper realistic. I feel like Marvel has a fundamental lack of respect for gravity. Season 2, I think, was better. There were some fun set pieces where they did, you know, some interesting effects with, like, for example, Bullseye killing people with all these different projectiles, which was fun. Some different choreographed moments with Daredevil, some fight scenes that I thought were really well done. It still felt a little bit like we're glossing over some moments, or some of the stunts just felt a little bit like some of the, you know, kickback if you get punched in the face and you like fly 50 feet in the air. It felt a little bit cheesy sometimes, but it was definitely an improvement. There still was a lot of CGI blood in season 2, which I was very off-put by in season 1. I don't know if that's just the show trying to insist that it's way more violent than any other Marvel series, whatever. As far as the music and the score, I actually thought that it was very well done. I'm not a huge fan of the new intro for Born Again, but it's grown on me a little bit. I still think that the original one is way better, but I'm trying not to be prejudiced with my opinion. I think that the songs that they picked throughout the season were really good. I knew that once I heard the Childish Gambino song for the trailer for season 2 that they were going to have much better music selection from season 1, and I think that they definitely lived up to that. As far as set design, you know, like everything looked really good, was happy with that. I want to bring up, and I don't know if this is correct section 2, but I guess we'll just see. There's a couple moments where I think the show was trying to play with like visual imagery that was speaking to things that were happening in the plot. I think some of these attempts were good attempts to make a commentary on what was happening in the plot, but some of them felt a little bit obvious in my opinion, but I appreciate the attempt. Like I said, for example, in episode 3, Helen, aka Heather, was trying to hang up a painting or something in her apartment, and she like put the nail in the drywall, and then the drywall cracked, which is supposed to show that she is cracking a little bit.
That's a little on the nose, don't you think?
There was also the fact that Vanessa was wearing a red dress when we last have her and Fisk interact before the boxing match on the day that she gets murdered, basically. And then you see her wearing white at the boxing arena. I thought that was a good visual foreshadowing with just playing around with color a little bit, letting us know that something might happen to her. Also, when all of the different Fisk army agents go in and raid Kirsten's office, they're basically like, fuck a search warrant. We don't need to do that. We don't even need to knock. Fuck you guys. And then they break the little Scales of Justice woman figurine that she had on her desk. It's like, yeah, justice is dead without search warrants. It did feel a little bit on the nose, but I appreciate that they were trying to do something. Now we have to talk about the finale a little bit. Here's the thing. I know a lot of people really liked the finale. I have a lot of qualms about it, and I found it ultimately to be pretty annoying, actually. Let's get into this. I think the revelation that Matt is Daredevil and him sharing that with everybody was a good surprise. I'm really not sure what they're going to do with that moving forward, because I feel like that's kind of fundamental to him as a superhero and his identity and all of that. Like, I don't know where they're even going to go from there except to prison, I guess. But I think in the circumstances, like, if he was going to reveal that, it would be to save Karen, and it would be to basically put Fisk behind bars, even though that didn't even fucking happen. I did laugh a little bit when I saw the clip, because just when he's like, "Oh, I'm Daredevil," it kind of sounded like he was trying to be Batman. It kind of made me laugh, that whole sequence of events, from the questioning, from the interjections of the judge, Fisk basically saying, "You can't handle the truth," in so many words. The fact that it was like almost verbatim like A Few Good Men, and that is how they brought Fisk down.
Did you order the code red?
You don't have to answer that question.
I'll answer the question.
Do not answer that. Why not answer? Do not answer it.
Answer it, sir.
I will answer it.
I have a greater responsibility than you can possibly fathom.
That I'm running this city and it's thriving. Anything else is above your pay grade.
You snotty little bastard.
You are a fool.
It was cool to see Matt take Fisk down in the legal sense versus like in the physical beating him up sense. The parallels between that and A Few Good Men was just really cracking me up. I don't know if I'm the only one who thought that. Of course, one of my biggest qualms with the finale is that after everything that Fisk has done, all of the murder that he has caused, basically killing people in plain sight in front of all of these witnesses, the fact that he did all of that and the governor is like, "Why don't you go on a beach somewhere and just like chill?" That feels absolutely fucking insane to me. And also too, the fact that like Matt Murdock is the one offering this to him, and he's like, "Will you promise this time that you'll, leave and stay out of trouble and never come back and never try to like run for president or something again?" If he has given you no reason to believe him the last 17 times, what the fuck makes you think that you're going to actually get the response that you think you're going to get this time around? Maybe this is like a commentary on the fact that politicians will truly never be held accountable. You just want to kind of smack Matt a little bit across the face and be like, how are you letting him go again? I don't know. It didn't feel like a satisfying conclusion. I wish the finale also was just ultimately split into 2 episodes, because it felt like there was a lot of things happening. I wish in the fallout of everything that happened with Fisk, it would have been cool to spend a little bit of time unpacking that, seeing how people responded to it, just seeing like maybe the dismantling of his little Secret Service army thing. So it would have been interesting even if we just saw like a BB report thing talking about just the fallout. Like, what do people think about that? What do people feel about vigilantes now? What do they feel about Fisk? What do they feel about him getting an island vacation for the rest of his life for basically murdering people in plain sight? Looking ahead, this is probably going to branch off into 5 different projects. We already know that the Punisher is involved with Spider-Man, and it looked like in the trailer for the Spider-Man Brand New Day, it looked like he was fighting the Hand, which is an enemy of Daredevil, as we saw in season 2 of the Netflix series. He's fighting them in what looks like a prison of some sort, and we know that Matt is going to prison. There's already some opportunities for overlap there. There's also the whole Doomsday movie that's coming out at the end of this year. I've seen rumors that Charlie Cox is going to be in it, but they keep things very close to the vest in that way, so I don't know if he's going to have any involvement or whatever. There's a lot of different avenues that I'm sure Marvel is going to be taking this. I'm just not entirely sure how successful they're all going to be, especially considering that like Fisk is coming back again for season 3, when they were like, okay, you promise if we ship you off onto this island that you're not going to cause any trouble again. The fact that he is coming back is inherently going to feel unsatisfactory, because all of that suffering was for nothing, and Matt is now in jail because of it. I have questions after watching season 2. Some of these are questions that I think don't have an answer. Some of them actually might have answers, maybe in the comic books, maybe in another Marvel project that I haven't seen. If there is an answer to the question, or you think you have an answer, please understand that I am going in and operating with maybe not the full picture with every bit of information from the Marvel universe. Why does no one suspect BB sooner? I don't know. I don't know. Seems pretty fucking dumb to me. Why does Helen think Muse is a vigilante? It just seemed like they both wear a mask. That means they're both vigilantes. Daredevil was trying to save you, girl. Where the hell is that in your memory? Which also brings the question for me of where does this universe draw the line between heroes and vigilantes? I know vigilantes they just act against the law and like regular legal channels, and they're just taking things into their own hands, and that's just kind of the conventional definition. Heroes in this universe are not uncommon. In Hawkeye, very underrated Marvel show in my opinion, you see Clint looking at the plaque where the Avengers initially assembled, and it's like glorifying them. It's showing them as heroes. I haven't kept up with absolutely every single project in the time since, but it seems like a lot of our heroes are still championed and revered and all of that. So do you have to be like registered as a hero or like publicly recognized as one to not be a vigilante anymore? Because technically heroes are constantly taking things into their own hands. It's just maybe some of them are more publicly acknowledged than others. So if Iron Man was still alive, is Iron Man a vigilante now, or do we know who he is so it doesn't matter? Also, is there no pushback from the rest of the country that this city of New York is under martial law? Wouldn't there be other people from other cities seeing what's going on and being like, that looks really fucked up. What is going on there? How did Karen and Matt get Wi-Fi in their bunker? Maybe there's an explanation. Maybe they have Starlink. Is Buck okay? Is he good? Probably not, but like, is he okay? Also, is Jack okay? Like, where did he go? I don't have concerns necessarily as to whether he's alive or not. I want to know what happened to him because I love him. Hello. It's really warm, but yes, let's cuddle. Why is Jessica Jones losing her powers? I'm sure there's an explanation for this in the comic book, so this is not a sarcastic question. This is literally me wondering what they're going to do with that. Is anyone going to ask why Fisk can just like go to a beach somewhere and not have to suffer any consequences? Even if I was like believing the narrative that he was putting out there and then I found out that he was like lying and also murdering people with his big bare hands, I would probably be like, maybe he should serve jail time, right? Maybe not go to a vacation somewhere. I also have just random observations that I made that I don't know where else to put in this video that I want to bring up. They got the editor from the Bulletin from the original Daredevil series to come back at the end of this season when BB got a job at the Daily Bulletin. I don't know why. That like shocked me. I was literally like, oh my god, wait, that's the same guy that talked to Ben Urich. I don't know why. That had like a chemical response in me for whatever reason, even though it really didn't have much of an impact on anything at all. Helen basically throat punching that weird district attorney who was trying to flirt with her amidst the lockdown and Buck bleeding out in the courtroom. I don't like Helen or align very much with any of her decisions this season, but I was kind of clapping a little bit for her. On that same note, I think she and Buck should be together. They kind of flirted with the idea a little bit this season. I think that they're both just conventionally attractive people who are kind of also terrible, and I think they would make a cute couple for that reason and that reason alone. People need to start reading the room when they are around Fisk and he is in distress. I couldn't help but chuckle when Fisk is training for his boxing thing and he's trying to talk to one of his agents. I think it was Buck actually. His trainer was like, while he's in the middle of an important conversation, he's the mayor also. He's like, come on, we're no more breaks, whatever. My dude, the mayor is having a conversation that could potentially be very important. Shut up. And then Fisk turns around and throws him into a glass wall.
Maybe you should.
When Vanessa literally dies, the surgeon who helped try to save her comes over and starts waxing poetic to him and being like, wow, she's now on one of the most beautiful journeys that is inevitable to all of us. Maybe we shouldn't be talking about that when this mentally unstable man just watched his wife pass away. Maybe we shouldn't do that because then he got murdered with Fisk's bare hand. Matt kneeling at the end of the finale. So Matt and Karen are going back to that restaurant that they went to in season 2 with all the string lights. Looks eerily familiar to my room, as you can probably tell. They're having a normal conversation. And I just also want to say, what do they even talk about at this point anymore? All that they managed to bond over this season was literally a revolution and overthrow of the mayor of New York City. But that's beside the point. You see the police pull up and they both know that Matt's going to get arrested. However, when he gets up and kneels down, I literally jumped out of my chair because I thought he was going to propose to her. And I was like, oh my God, Matt, don't fucking do that when you're about to go to jail. But he was just putting his hands over his head. It did scare me a little bit, but I thought that was really funny. Okay, we're finally done. That is literally all that I have to say about Daredevil Born Again Season 2. In summary, was it the best thing I've ever seen in my entire life? No, absolutely not. Do I think that it held a candle in any way, shape, or form to any of the seasons of Daredevil from the Netflix series? No! I do think there's a lot of room for improvement for Daredevil Born Again Season 2. I think they're on the right path. The fact that Daredevil Born Again is so intertwined with all of the other storylines from Marvel, trying to watch this in isolation and just kind of take things for what it is without having to consider what it could turn into in a future project however many years down the line, it kind of makes it hard to look at it for what it is and enjoy it as just an isolated product, because it's not. And that was something that the original Netflix series didn't have to worry about, and in some ways might be controversial, but I think it was maybe a little bit better for it, just for telling a more solid, consistent, coherent story. There's a lot of murkiness going on with Marvel. It's leaving doors open in different directions that maybe might be realized and maybe might not, and I think that causes some problems when you're just trying to enjoy a story in isolation. But we'll see what happens with that. I am curious to see what happens next, and I think there's a rewatchability to the second season, actually, weirdly, that I don't think the first season had at all. So that in and of itself is also a major accomplishment, given how cynical I was going into this season. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe. Let me know in the comment section what you think of Daredevil Born Again Season 2. Like I said, please be nice to me, because I don't know everything about Marvel. I'm not an expert, but I'm not trying to be. Anyways, I'm going to go edit this video, which is going to take a very long time. I'm also going to pay attention to my cat, because otherwise she's going to murder me in my sleep. Bye!